Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker. You are listening to 129, where you're joining me live on Facebook or YouTube. Today is Sunday, February 21st, and I will be solo today. Jeff the Animal Wilson is out fighting crime or homeless people. I can't remember which. Maybe homeless people committing crimes. I don't know. It's one of the three. In any case, we're coming off of UFC Fight Night 185 from the Apex in Las Vegas. So I'm going to have myself a little bourbon here and talk to you guys about it. I am currently sipping a Bowman Brothers straight bourbon whiskey, small batch. They're out of Virginia. This is a nice light drinking bourbon. 90 proof. Doesn't have too much of a bite to it. Pretty smooth. A little on the sweet side. It's got kind of that cherry sweetness that you get in bourbon sometimes, like from a Blanton's or a Russell's Reserve. It's a nice little sip. If it tastes familiar to you, if you happen to get your hands on a bottle, it's because this particular distillery is owned by the Sazerac Company, which also owns Buffalo Trace. So they use similar mash bills to some of the Buffalo Trace recipes in their whiskey, and it's quite tasty. So cheers, everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me. What the hell I'm talking about. Let's get into it. First of all, 4 fighters missed weight for this card, and I don't want to spend too much time on it because you guys know I get riled up talking about fighters missing weight. I mean, it's half of your contract. All you have to do is make weight and then fight. Those are 2 things you have to do. Those are your 2 responsibilities. Everything else is pretty much planned out for you. And my buddy Ryan says that Texas is warming up today now that Derrick's balls are back in town, according to him. So Derrick Lewis brought his hot balls back to Texas and was melting the snow. So yes, no more politicians have to flee to Mexico for safety. Let's see. Mark on the other side of the world joining the podcast, drinking a triple IPA in honor of Derrick's triple KO. Yeah, I guess there was a few extra shots in there on that finish. But cheers, Mark. It seems that no matter what time of day I do this show, Mark is tuning in and drinking because he's just a savage like that. It's probably like 7 a.m. in Australia right now. And he's just like, triple IPA, start the day off. All right. So 4 fighters miss weight. Jared Gordon missed weight. Draco Rodriguez missed weight in his first UFC fight. The one that was really bad, though, I mean, Jared Gordon was pretty bad because he missed weight by 5 pounds. Rafael Alves missed weight. He weighed in 157.5 pounds for a featherweight fight, and they had to call the fight off. This was his UFC debut. And the most ridiculous part of this is he says it's because he ate too much salmon. Now, I'm not a dietitian. I'm not any kind of nutritional expert. Obviously, I'm sitting here drinking dark liquor every time I'm talking to you guys every week. So don't come to me for dieting advice. But I never in my lifetime have I heard somebody say like, oh, man, I'm getting really fat lately. And I'd say like, well, what's your diet been like? And they're like, oh, I've just been eating so much salmon. Never. In fact, it's probably one of the healthiest things you can eat. It's got a lot of fat, but it's got a lot of healthy fats in it. A lot of those omega-3s that they talk about that you should be consuming so much of. I just don't understand. Like, yeah, I ate all this salmon and now I'm 17 pounds overweight. Like, come on, man. Yeah. Mark says it must have been one big fucking fish. Yeah. I mean, did you eat like a whole school of fish? Rafael, what's going on here? But 4 fighters missing weight. This is getting ridiculous now. Like, I understand like when the fights were first getting started after the quarantine and stuff, and they didn't maybe have access to their normal foods. You could give a little bit of a buffer there, but come on now, we're at a point now where you can get any groceries you want. And also, if fish was making you fat, then like just stop eating it. Like if that's what you really believe was doing it. You got to be tracking your weight. You got to be tracking your weight throughout your entire fight camp. I mean, you get these guys who will just train really hard and eat a lot to keep their energy up through their training camps and then try to cut 20, 30 pounds the week of the fight. That's just not healthy. That's not smart. We need to put an end to this somehow. I put out many suggestions over the years. They typically fall on deaf ears because nobody wants to do anything. I think the financial penalty isn't enough because at one point, like if you're cutting weight and you're totally miserable and you're like, I'm going to have to give up 30% of my money and I'm also going to have an advantage tomorrow night, so I have a better chance of getting my win bonus. Like, come on, 9 out of 10 fighters are going to be like, all right, I'll just, keep the extra weight. I'll pay the fine and then, I'll win the fight. I'll get my win bonus this time. And then next time I'll do a better job cutting weight. There's got to be a worse punishment. I think it should be an automatic point deduction from the fight, which can be huge, especially with, some of the judging that we saw last night, which we'll get into as well. But there has to be a more strict punishment because the 30% isn't doing it. I mean, when you have 4 fighters on a card with like 10 fights on it, missing weight, that's just unacceptable now. And this never used to be a problem back in the day. They solved this problem in wrestling by having day-in weigh-ins, day of weigh-ins. You weigh in and then you're wrestling like an hour later, usually. So, yeah, I mean, guys would still cut weight, but they wouldn't do it as drastic to a point where they're like almost passing out. The other thing that happened before we get into the fights that did take place, Drakkar, Klose, and Luis Pena was called off hours beforehand because I guess one of Drakkar, Klose's coaches tested positive for COVID. So according to the protocol, in order to keep everybody safe, they had to call that fight off. That's unfortunate. But still, the UFC is one of the only sports organizations that actually has figured this thing out pretty well and has been able to keep people safe. You haven't, or I haven't heard of any cases really of fighters getting COVID after competing in the UFC. You're only hearing them catching people on the way in. And it's unfortunate it had to happen hours beforehand because both guys already did everything. I know Luis Pena really wanted to fight. And he was tweeting Dana White all night, like begging, like let me get in there. Let's, if we have to weigh in again, whatever we have to do. But, obviously the commission wouldn't allow that. Once it gets called off, that's it. It's off. That's just the way it goes. And it sucks, but, it is what it is. And that's all it is. So let's start off. Fight Night 185, UFC Vegas 19. It gets so hard to keep track of these because people call them different things. I usually go by the hashtag UFC Vegas 19. So Derrick Lewis, Curtis Blaydes. I told you guys last week that this one would be interesting because Derrick has good takedown defense and he's really hard to hold down. We only found out the answer to one of those questions, as far as those skills being tested. We didn't see if Blaydes would be able to hold him down because he didn't get him down. Curtis Blaydes looked a little bit off to me. He looked a little bit flat in there. He was kind of doing the Macy Barber and jabbing from really far away and couldn't find his range. And that wound up being what did him in because he shot for a takedown from just too far out. And Derrick Lewis was able to wind up on that uppercut, put Curtis Blaydes to sleep before he even hit the ground, and then he landed a couple of extra shots, once Blaydes was stiffened up on the ground. It was unfortunate to see. I always hate seeing like once a guy is unconscious and stiff, taking those extra shots, but I don't think Derrick did anything wrong. He kept going until Herb Dean pulled him off, and that's his job, and he did his job. So there's that. It's unfortunate, though. You don't want to see a guy taking shots like that, especially from such a hammer like Derrick Lewis. Tied the record for most knockouts in UFC history with Vitor Belfort, which is awesome. Derrick Lewis is always an entertaining fighter, except when he's fighting Francis Ngannou. And it's because he has that ability to end the fight with one shot. He just has that weird power. When you think about him, you don't think about like a really skilled fighter, like a really high fight IQ, like a really well-rounded fighter. He's not a wrestler. He's not a grappler. On the ground, he doesn't do anything technically correct. But it's never mattered. He does things his own way, and maybe that's why they work. You don't always have to follow the way things are always done, the way you always defend a takedown, the way you always defend a submission, the way you always get up from the ground. Sometimes people just have freakish abilities like Derrick Lewis, and they're able to use them in there. So maybe we're all wrong in the techniques we've developed over the years, but I'm always willing to admit that. I'm always willing to admit, if I am really convicted about a technique being correct, I'm open to being wrong about that. In any case, devastating knockout by Derrick Lewis. He looked good. He looked patient in there. A lot of people were saying like Curtis Blaydes looked good up till that point. I mean, he was controlling the pace, but that was kind of because Derrick was letting him. So that was a little weird to see because, Derrick was being patient. He was waiting for that shot. And the fact that it came from so far out just gave him more time to wind up on that uppercut. It was just nasty, man. Big credit to Derrick Lewis, though, for having a game plan, sticking to it, and executing it. He basically said, I knew I was going to catch him with the uppercut or with a knee. It was going to be one or the other. So he got the uppercut, he got the knockout, and I imagine he's going to pass the record. Vitor, obviously, Vitor is not going to knock out anybody else in the UFC because he's off doing, whatever he's about to do in Brazil or Japan or wherever he's going to go, where he can get back on the TRT. And I'll be watching when he does because Vitor Belfort is exciting as hell. Even at his age, I'm sure he's still got lightning quick hands. So what's next for Derrick Lewis? That's kind of complicated because that was 5 wins in a row. A lot of people are talking about Blaydes getting a title shot. I don't know when he was going to get it because we got, Stipe and Ngannou coming up. And then John Jones has kind of indirectly been promised the winner of that. But then you never know what happens. Like if Ngannou wins and it's a close fight, they're going to have to do the trilogy with Stipe. And if Stipe wins, he likes to take a lot of time off in between fights because he's got a full-time job. He's got a young daughter. He likes to spend time with his family. He takes his time. So if you're waiting for a title shot, a lot of people were wondering why Derrick Lewis was calling out Overeem. It's because he wants to stay active and he knows there's not much else out there right now. He could challenge John Jones, but he's not going to get that fight. He could say he wants the title, but that title is going to be tied up for like a year, in my estimation, the way I explain things working out, which is what I think is going to happen. His best shot of getting that title shot would be if Ngannou wins with a quick knockout, and then within 2 months is fighting John Jones, and then that's settled quick, and then we can maybe get Derrick Lewis in there for the title sometime in the summer. A lot of people are calling for that Ngannou rematch now. They think it's going to be better. Maybe. That was kind of like that dark period for Derrick Lewis where he was having the back issues and he was talking about retiring and he didn't really want to be in there. Now we got him like in pretty good shape. He seems motivated. He wants to stay active. This is a fun time to be watching Derrick Lewis, and it's unfortunate that he's not going to be able to get in there for the title right away. It's definitely deserved, especially after a performance like that, where nobody has like really convincingly beaten Curtis Blaydes. His only losses are to Ngannou. One was due to a cut. The other one was, pretty widely accepted as an early stoppage. But there was no doubt about this one. He finished Curtis Blaydes and did to him what nobody else in this division has been able to do. So he called out Overeem. It was really funny the way he did it. He's like, I'm oiled up for Overeem. We could do it right now. Let's clap them cheeks. So another another stellar soundbite from Derrick Lewis. I was waiting for it because it didn't really. I don't think it came in his immediate post-fight interview. He was kind of laid back in that one, but I think it was when he was talking to Laura Sanko, and I was just cracking up because he just has such an awesome delivery with everything he says. He's got that slow kind of Texas drawl, and he's so deadpan all the time. He's just a funny fucking guy. I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine the other day. We were talking about some of his best lines, and the one that comes to mind for me is always like he was trying to go heel when he fought Travis Brown and talk about his wife, and then people just loved him even more when he's like, "Where Ronda Rousey's fine ass at?" And that one was my favorite. And of course, there's my balls was hot when he took off his pants being interviewed by Joe Rogan. I think he's got the record for most one-liners in the UFC as well. He's tied for the record most knockouts, and he owns the record for the most one-liners. So it'll be interesting. Curtis Blaydes obviously going to have to be knocked down a peg, but he'll be back. I mean, that guy's such an awesome fighter. He just had a flat night, or he was worried about closing the distance with Derrick Lewis because there was that shot, but I mean, I knew it was going to be bad when he would go for the takedown because he was so far away with his jabs. Even when he was connecting, he was like on the end of them. He wasn't close enough to be shooting in on Derrick's hips. And then, he didn't set up the takedown with anything. He just kind of dove in there. And that's exactly what you don't want to do against somebody like Derrick Lewis. I think Michael Bisping even called it. He said that Derrick Lewis was waiting to counter the takedown attempt with the uppercut. So the way you avoid that is you throw punches at his face, so he has to use his hands to cover his face, and he can't be throwing them into your face when you're trying to dive in on his hips. But that's not the way it went down. I'm sure Curtis is going to learn from it. He's a smart fighter. He's always had good strategy with his takedowns. Junior college champion. Great wrestling for MMA. He's been able to adapt it very well, especially in the heavyweight division, taking down these monsters. So I'm sure he'll make the proper adjustments. Co-main event, Yana Kunitskaya getting the decision over Ketlen Vieira. This was an interesting one because I don't necessarily disagree with the decision. Kunitskaya getting the decision. I think Ketlen Vieira won the first round. Kunitskaya, I think, won the second round because she spent it on top. And again, Bisping was right. He was saying Vieira was spending too much time on her back and she's going for submission. She should get back up to her feet and, either strike with Kunitskaya or try and get on top. And I definitely agree with that. And then the third round, Vieira would get Kunitskaya down and would get on top of her, but wasn't doing a lot of damage. And when Kunitskaya got on top, she turned Ketlen Vieira into a bloody mess. So I don't necessarily disagree with the decision. I think Kunitskaya deserved to win, but as far as what we're used to seeing from the judging, the criteria that they're looking for, if someone is able to spend more time on top, they're usually going to get the decision. Now, there was a big significant strike discrepancy here. It was like 178 for Kunitskaya to, I think it might have been even like single digits or maybe 20 for Ketlen Vieira. So if you're looking at that, if you're looking at damage, so yeah, I think traditional scoring, even though Vieira got bloodied up in that third round, you would give the first and the third to Vieira, but I see what they were going for with this decision here. And, Yana Kunitskaya comes out on top. Both girls definitely showed a lot of improvement, and they both showed where they need to make more improvements. So that was a good fight. It was very competitive, very back and forth. Darrick Minner dominated Charles Rosa, pretty much how I saw this one going. Minner got him down fairly easily, and Charles has good jiu-jitsu, but just seems to get himself in bad positions quite a bit. And Minner was pretty close with a couple of those head and arm chokes. There were just like some some slight adjustments he needed to make with those. At one point, I think it was in the second round, he had it locked up really tight, and all he had to do was drop his hips to the ground. But because he kept his hips up in the air, Charles Rosa was able to get his leg underneath and take the pressure off of that choke, and then eventually lift Minner off of him and get the pressure off of his neck. But the way Rosa was defending those head and arm chokes, what they call it answering the phone, where you kind of put your hand behind your head and put your elbow next to your head. If you execute the choke properly, that defense doesn't really do anything. It will take a little longer for you to pass out. But that's all it'll do is buy you some time. It's not an actual defense. The actual defense is the way Rosa got out of it in the second round, where he hooked the leg and was able to elevate Minner to take the pressure off. The answering the phone is just like a desperation thing that will buy you some time. But if Minner had just dropped his hips to the mat, and I always say the shoulder pressure on that choke should be like letting the air out of a tire, where you just kind of drop your shoulder towards the mat into your opponent's neck slowly. A lot of people will squeeze from that position. You don't really even need to do that. You just need to slowly let gravity do the work and drop your shoulder into the neck. And then, your opponent's arm on the other side will be cutting off the circulation to the brain as well. So it's the combination of the two. So, but regardless, Minner was close to finishing that fight a couple of times. Rosa had a couple of submissions that he went for. At one point, he went for like a footlock that was like not really anything. He had a Kimura at one point that tied Minner up a little bit, but for the most part, this was a dominant performance by Darrick Minner, who really just showed his experience in there. Not a good night for the old guys, the old Russian heavyweights, both of which I'm huge fans of. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, I love Aleksei Oleinik. I love Andrei Arlovski. It was tough to see them get knocked out like this, both of them. But, Oleinik was in there, and it was looking good for him when he had Daukaus up against the cage, because Daukaus was panicking a little bit, and you could tell he was panicking because he didn't want to get dragged down to the ground. But it seemed like once Oleinik almost got him to the ground and he saw Daukaus panic, it was like he rushed in a little too much because he was a little too anxious to get in there, because he knew he was making him panic, and he rushed right into some punches. And, Daukaus has some quick hands, so he was able to put Oleinik away. I don't see any reason to not put Chris Daukaus in there with Tom Aspinall, tapped out Andrei Arlovski. First submission loss for Arlovski ever. Arlovski's a good grappler. I think what really happened there, though, is Aspinall hit that blast double leg and took Arlovski down into the cage and knocked the wind out of him completely. So he had no breath in his lungs by the time Aspinall got under the chin, and he was able to get the quick and frustrated tap from Arlovski. You could tell he was really frustrated there. And, before that even happened, though, you could see Aspinall had the quicker hands. Arlovski was trying to fire off some fast combinations, and his hands still looked good. He was just a few steps behind Aspinall, who's just like a young killer. And Arlovski's path to victory was not to outbox Aspinall. It was to kind of make it a dirty fight and get him up against the cage and use some dirty boxing, use the clinch, maybe get him to the ground and beat him up a little bit. That's the way Arlovski was going to be able to win. But Aspinall showed that he was pretty much better everywhere else. He was better from the long distance striking. He had faster hands, a little bit more power. He really caught Arlovski off guard with that double leg, which also makes me think that he had the wind knocked out of him when he hit the ground. And then, he snapped on that rear naked choke. The choke was just for show. Arlovski was kind of done at that point after the double leg. So it sucks, man. It sucks. 42 years old. But I mean, if he leaves the UFC and goes over to Bellator, they'd be like, "Welcome to the roster, kid." he'd be the youngest guy on the Bellator heavyweight roster. It'd be like, dude, you're not even collecting Social Security yet? What are you doing over here? Go back to the UFC. Anyway, one fight I skipped over here, and not intentionally. I just wanted to talk about the two heavyweight fights at the same time. Phil Hawes, who I know Jeff was rooting for because he's from his hometown, North Bergen, New Jersey. Poor Joe Martinez butchered that one. He called it Bergen, New Jersey. So that was kind of weird. Joe Martinez looked a little off last night. I don't know. It looked like he was wearing a suit that didn't fit quite right, and he was trying to keep it buttoned, but the button didn't really fit, and the collar was like riding up his neck. So he had kind of like a Quasimodo thing going on. I do like Joe Martinez, though. I'm a fan of his. I know a lot of people shit on his announcing, but I've always liked him. Back in, I believe it was at WEC, he used to do the announcing for ring announcing. But yeah, for sure get a new suit, Joe. So Phil Hawes getting the win over Nassourdine Imavov. And Hawes showed off a lot of good skills here. He was patient with his strikes, excellent with the wrestling. He had some really nice entries, some really nice takedowns, but he got rocked a couple of times in there. And I think he deserved to win the fight. He got rocked really bad in that third round. Imavov obviously won that third round, but I think Hawes won 1 and 2. And I wouldn't say it was a 10-8, although I could see the justification since he almost got finished, but he didn't really get dropped. He got wobbled on his feet, and he was able to press Imavov up against the cage. I guess one judge did have it as a draw because it says it was a majority decision. And you guys know I rarely have the volume on while I'm watching the fight, so I don't like to be influenced by the commentators. Sometimes I will turn it up if there's something like I can't figure out what's going on. I'll turn it up. So yeah, it worries me though that he got rocked a couple of times by Imavov, who's more of a grappler. But the good thing for Hawes is that he was able to out grapple him. He was able to take him down with ease. He didn't really have any trouble from him on the ground. But yeah, he did eat some big shots, and I would be worried for him if I were his coaches, seeing him get into, this upper echelon of the middleweight division where it's very striking heavy. If he takes a couple of shots like that from like a Darren Till or a Robert Whitaker or Paulo Costa, he's not going to be able to just grab one of those guys and hold him against the cage. So he's going to have to work on his footwork and his head movement. The wrestling is there. Another junior college wrestler here. I think he wrestled in Iowa. Very, very good wrestling skills. I was impressed with his takedowns. He looked good, but yeah, it got a little questionable at the end when he was really wobbled by a guy who's not known as a striker. Jared Gordon beat Danny Chavez, but he missed weight, so I'm not going to waste any time on that. John Castaneda knocked out Eddie Wineland right at the end of the first round. That was pretty brutal, man. Eddie Wineland's a veteran, bantamweight champion over in the WEC. He's been doing this a long time. He didn't look bad in there. Castaneda was just patient. He waited for his shot and landed it. This one was the fight of the night for me, and it was only 56 seconds. Julian Erosa and Nate Landwehr. And I'm just realizing now Nate Landwehr is like kind of that strange guy. He gave like a weird post-fight interview once, but I kind of forgotten about him. And Erosa's been around for a while. Season 22, The Ultimate Fighter. He was on Billy Quarantillo's season. These two, like Erosa got rocked and Landwehr got rocked, and I think Erosa got rocked again. These two were just like slinging leather, and then all of a sudden Erosa hits this flying knee, like a switch flying knee, that put Landwehr down into the cage. And the way he went down, I could see why Mark Smith stopped this one pretty quick. He was upset about it, but his eyes were glazed over. He was done. Clean knockout for Julian Erosa, in my opinion. And then the rest of the fight, Casey O'Neill making her UFC debut, TKO over Shayna Dobson in the second round. Amon Zahabi knocks out Draco Rodriguez, who also missed weight in the first round of their fight. And then Sergey Spivak in the second round TKO over Jared Vandera. Yeah, the announcers kept talking about how there were so many finishes. I was excited about it because I thought the card would move a little quicker. And it was over pretty early, but not as quick as I would have hoped. So fun card. Worth the price of admission, which was free from my living room. So I thought it was good. I thought it was a fun night. Yeah. So Fight Night 185. Let's put a bow on that. If you guys have anything that I missed or that I didn't talk about, feel free to message me after the fact. Before we get into next week's cards, don't forget you guys can get a hold of some MMA on the Rocks merchandise through our friends at Team Reaper. The website is reaper1.co. And as always, I'll put the link in the show notes. Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you guys happen to be listening, Spotify. I'll put the links there. You can grab an over the top under the influence sweatshirt, t-shirt, or tank top. And I don't even have one of the tank tops. So, you have a chance to buy one before I even get one. I gotta let my friends over there know I need a tank top or two. It's gonna be summer season. I'm gonna have to work on my base tan here, folks. As you can see, I'm not blessed with a bronze complexion. Unlike my wife. My wife is South American. She walks out the door to get the newspaper and comes back in with a tan. So we all can't be so lucky. I was gifted with this fair Irish complexion. I walk out to get the newspaper and I come back looking like a lobster. In any case, MMA on the Rocks merchandise from our friends at Team Reaper. So go pick up a t-shirt or something. Oh, you can use the promo code MMA Rocks 10. Save yourself some money. That's MMA ROCKS 10 for those of you who are have a deficiency in spelling. I want to make sure I'm helping you guys out here. All right, UFC Fight Night 186, also going to be at the Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. I guess this would be UFC Vegas 20 as far as the hashtags go. Main event, I'm really excited for this one. Jairzinho Rosenstrike against Cyril Gane. I've been telling you guys about Rosenstrike for a long time. I told you about him when he made his UFC debut a few years ago. I've been excited every single time he's fought. And, his only loss was that bum rush knockout from Ngannou, which, who's not going to get knocked out by that? Still fairly inexperienced in MMA, only 12 fights. Cyril Gane, only 7 fights, but Cyril Gane is undefeated. Gane is definitely the more well-rounded fighter. We know what Rosenstrike's going to do. He's, world-class kickboxer, tons of experience there. He's going to come try and take your head off bell to bell. We saw evidence of that in the Overeem fight where he was losing the entire fight and then right in the last 15 seconds splits Overeem's face wide open and getting the last minute TKO there. But Cyril Gane, we've seen fantastic striking from him, knocked out Junior Dos Santos in his last fight. We've seen heel hooks from him. We've seen other submissions from him. Very good grappling for a heavyweight, which is not something you usually see. The heavier guys tend to not develop the grappling technique very well because they can get away with so much on the ground just using strength and powering out of things. But you can tell that Cyril Gane has taken the time to really develop his ground technique. So if this fight goes to the ground, I would definitely give him an advantage there. We haven't seen too much of Rosenstrike on the ground. We haven't seen anybody really able to get him there. But if Gane is able to get him there, he's going to be a lot of trouble. I'm not too sure what Rosenstrike's ground game looks like, but I'm excited to find out. And then you got to give the power advantage to Rosenstrike, man, that guy hits so hard. And he's had some crazy knockouts in the UFC already. So this is a really interesting fight, man. I love that these two guys are being highlighted in a main event. Rosenstrike, 32 years old. So he's not even in his prime for a heavyweight for another 10 years. Both of these guys knocked out Junior Dos Santos in their last fight. And yeah, Rosenstrike has the knockout over Overeem, like I said, knocked out Andrei Arlovski in 29 seconds, knocked out Alan Crowder in 9 seconds. So yeah, this is going to be a really fun fight. Really fun fight. And plus we've already seen how Rosenstrike bounces back from that loss. He came back and beat a legend like JDS. Co-main event is a fun one. Nikita Krylov and Magomed Ankalaev. This is a fun one. This one's going to fly under the radar. These are two badass fighters. Krylov's 27-7, got a lot more experience, but Ankalaev only has one loss, 14-1. So that's going to be fun. Pedro Munoz and Jimmy Rivera. This is a really fun bantamweight fight. Whoever wins this one is going to be bumped up closer to that title talk conversation, but they've both been a little hot and cold. Angela Hill getting back in there. She's had a long layoff for her, like 3 months. Usually she's fighting like every other weekend, I feel like, but she's getting in there with Ashley Yoder. That should be a fun competitive fight. Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres getting in there with Kevin Kroom. Macy Chiasson against Marion Renault. That's a fun fight. I feel like Marion Renault just fought. Somebody confirm that for me. Alexander Hernandez and Thiago Moises going to get in there and do the thing. Cowboy Oliveira and Randy Brown. And that'll be my sleeper fight pick. I feel like not a lot of people will be talking about that one, but that's going to be a really fun fight. Two guys that really get after it in there. Alex Oliveira and Randy Brown. That should be really fun. William Knight and Alonzo Menefield. I changed my mind. This is a sleeper fight. William Knight is a fucking beast. And so is Alonzo Menefield. These guys are going to put on a really good fight. 9-1 against 9-2. William Knight, he's shown that he could be a little bit more patient in there. And even though he carries like a ton of muscle, he can still go the distance and still put a pretty quick pace in there. And Menefield has shown a little bit of a weakness to that, but Menefield has the ability. In that first round and a half, he's super dangerous. Super dangerous. That's a really fun fight. So that's my sleeper fight pick, William Knight and Alonzo Menefield. Remember, you heard that here first. I may not be able to tell you guys like how to win money and like who to bet on, but I can tell you the exciting fights that you should not miss. All right. Pretty quick episode this week. I guess I kind of flew through everything because I didn't have Jeff to banter back and forth with. So still pretty early in the night. I'm going to see what I'm going to do for dinner. I'm going to enjoy some more of this Bowman Brothers bourbon here. Definitely recommend it. It's make sure you don't overpay for it too, because a lot of liquor stores are price gouging a lot of stuff like this, especially that comes through that Sazerac Buffalo Trace lineage. So make sure you're paying between like $30 and $40 for this bottle. If you see it for more than that, just pass on it and go for it another time. But if you see it in that $30, $35 range, definitely pick it up. It's a nice sip. Makes for a nice dram. I drink it neat personally. I always say I prefer my whiskey neat, but MMA neat would have been a stupid name for a show. So that's what I'm going to do. If you guys want to get a hold of Jeff the Animal Wilson and break his balls about missing the episode this week, you can do so at animal_Wilson, Twitter and Instagram. And, find out if he was fighting crime or fighting homeless people. I'm still not sure the answer to that. You guys know how to get a hold of me. It's at MMA on the Rocks everywhere on social media. Send me an email, MMAontheRocks@gmail.com. You can go to the website, which I haven't updated in quite a bit. Probably should get back on top of that, writing articles and stuff like that, but just haven't had the time. I'm a busy man. And of course, you can get your MMA on the Rocks merchandise through our friends at Team Reaper, reaper1.co. Use the promo code MMARocks10. And you can use the promo code and buy other stuff. You can buy some training gear, MMA sparring gloves, jiu-jitsu gis. They got all that stuff, and it all looks pretty badass. And you can support some other fighters as well. They've got a couple of Bellator fighters, UFC fighters, a lot of local Florida fighters. And they all have really cool t-shirt designs. So go check out their website and check out the merchandise there with my friends over there. And anything else going on? No, I don't think so. And if there is, you guys will remind me of it, and I will talk about it next week. All right. So until next time, cheers, everybody. Goodbye.